That's right.
All right. Okay, everybody, it is 10 o'clock. I'm going to call the meeting to order. If you would rise for the pledge, please.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We are going to open up for public forum. If you come up, you have 3 minutes to speak. If you state your name and where you're from, please.
Good morning. My name is Tony Bakhtiari. I'm one of the board supervisor for Windermere Township. I'm going to give my time to Mr. Vern Anderson. Thank you.
Good morning, commissioners. I'm Vern Anderson with Windermere Township. But first off, I want to give a couple comments here with regards to the county-owned property, the 47,000 acres. So a little bit of my background. I'm in real estate 21 years, and some of the stuff's been brought to my attention that we have about 47,000 acres that are on the books, and which, in my opinion, holds some pretty good value. If you kind of figure $1,000 an acre on average right now on the low end, you've got quite a bit of dollars sitting there in real estate. If you put that out back to the private sector, you'll certainly be probably gaining more value, more property tax over the years. And so just something for you guys to maybe have a consideration, with that. Right now that, $1,000 an acre is probably on the very low side of this thing. So if you want to have a longer discussion, I'm certainly open to that at some point with my background. So number two, I'll put my hat on, Windermere Township Roads Manager. Been in that position now a little over a year, and kind of want to give you guys a little bit of an update here with regards to our, there's a project up in our township, one of the most unique bridges in the state of Minnesota, Sturgeon Island Bridge. We did go ahead and cover that at the expense of the township over the state-funded project. And that's kind of what I want to update you guys on. That project started with a contract with S&R Reinforcement back on August 14, 2023. And as of this date, the project is still ongoing. Trying to get some resolve here. We're working well with your engineers, Mark LeBron and Aaron Gunderson. They've been great to work with. But I just want to kind of give you guys a progress report that it's still ongoing. Looking to get that finished here yet this fall because the contract stated 60 working days. And obviously we're well beyond that 60 working days. So just an FYI for you folks. But I also want to formally invite you all to come up there and take a look at that project. So if you felt obliged to have that conversation and want to come up there as a group, be more than happy to show you around and where we're at with the progress report, and you get a chance to see firsthand the only covered bridge in the state of Minnesota that allows vehicle traffic. So I'm open for questions, and I'm looking forward to you guys coming up and taking a look at that project. So, okay, thank you.
Sure.
First, I gotta say, I love all of you guys. I love everybody. So anything I say, don't hold it against me.
Patrice, do you want to say who you are and where you're from?
I will.
Okay, thank you.
And he's handing out papers. Good morning. I'm Patrice DeGray from Royalton Township. I'm a retired, self-employed tax professional. I've spent many years, almost 30, researching and reading laws. I was required to spend 60+ hours a week through April 15th each year to earn most of my paycheck. I've never been a government employee, and I realized that government processes operate much differently. What took me one day to accomplish takes government a couple months. unless there's a trifecta in state government and it's time to pass a cannabis law without any direction to go. Even the office has had a hard time knowing which way to go. I believe you all have received the information by email, but you've received it now. The local portion of the Minnesota statute 342.13 local control as it's amended. This is the pure law without all the portions scratched out or added. So please read it. I also printed page 15 of document from the Office of Cannabis Management that deals with local certification of zoning compliance. Please notice the bolded portion, certify compliance with local zoning ordinances. Who's making these local zoning ordinances? Can Royalton Township copy the ordinance that the county has created for the townships that you cover? Or could you please take on the whole cannabis situation to cover all the townships that sign it over to you? Could weekly meetings be set up with the county zoning to get this written? Could you confer with other counties to see what they are doing and copy some of them? This is a mess. I'll be at the zoning meeting and I would like an agenda and I'd like to be on the agenda if that's possible. Thank you.
Thank you.
You, Patrice.
Let Patrice go first. And Ms. Weiss. And I do have a couple of things I think Gary will hand out. I did send a draft that we're tag teaming. We're learning advantages here. I also do have some of the setbacks. I believe most everything is similar. I do have a question for Reese as far as the new zoning that came out for compliance with the OCM, and it states that local governments are able to use conditional use permits or possibly interim use permits. So I would really like clarification from Reese on that, on how we're going to do that. I know that the last zoning meeting, I've had a couple questions, but we had closed it. One is I know we've spoken very highly of the tribal facility and how well maintained it is. I believe everybody would be wonderful if that were the case, but for most of the facilities that will be going in, they won't have all of those mitigations that are implemented in there. They're not required to by law unless we're going to require by some zoning. The other thing is that I believe Pekagamon Township, they're within a mile from the largest facility that's allowed. They will be dealing with some of the noxious fumes, the lights and such from a large facility, yet they will have zero voting rights, but they still pay their property taxes to Pine County, just as we do. So I think that if it was a county deal, it would be a much better deal. Also, I do know that Arna Township, there was a deal on that. Still looking into that, but that the county did help Arna Township out. And this will affect all of the townships, and we do have to write some of these zoning ordinances for the few that have signed in. So I would think that there's been a precedent set that we could all be covered. Besides the graphics, social equity is coming out. It will be out sooner. Jason Rarick told me in April that for every $1 Colorado receives, Colorado spends $8. So if we're expected to receive possibly $19,000 on the high end, we can expect to be spending about $160,000 of our community's tax dollars. So this, again, it's federally illegal. It's not a necessity of life. It's to get high. It doesn't cure anything. This is really not a benefit to the community versus what it can be as a destruction to the community. I look forward to the zoning also. And I thank you guys for your time. I do have some of the setbacks of this current facility. Like I said, this can happen to anybody. The rules that we're putting in place will be for today, tomorrow, maybe your friends, neighbors, maybe the next person on the board 10 years from now. So this having a really good foundation is so important right now. Should I give this,
Can I take that? Paper.
There.
Keep going on.
So he's the one that you're gonna talk to get on the zoning board agenda, and he's also the one that you're gonna talk to get the packet emailed to you, okay?
That's how I said it.
Oh, you do, okay, thank you.
They knew we were probably coming, huh?
No, you can say it.
Oh. Is there anything else about to speak with public forum? Please. Here, you just a letter. We're the letter in order.
Yeah.
Good job. Good job. Thank you. All right, so we're going to adopt the agenda. We do have some additions.
Madam Chair, members of the board, if we could correct consent agenda item number 7A, the starting page to be 24.89 per hour. And if we could add regular agenda item number 5.1, consider resolution 2024-49 and courthouse security grant application. And there's additional information for regular agenda item number 4, the contract 2402 for highway construction.
Any questions on the additions? Or,
I'll move the agenda as amended.
thank you, Steve.
second.
Thank you. So we have a motion by Steve, a second by Matt. Are there any questions once again? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. So we're going to approve minutes from August 6th and the summary for publication. Are there any questions on those? We have a motion, please.
I'll move it.
I have
Thanks,
a
John.
question, Madam Chair.
I'm sorry, what?
I still have a question. On
Yep, go ahead, G.
the minutes, was there an error on the minutes with the updating of the HHS committee? I think it worded it that I think timing was kind of off. I think the meeting was the 5th for HHS, and then our meeting was the 6th. And it said we were going to discuss it at the last meeting. We didn't. So are we going to discuss the HHS at this meeting? I think it was over. It has been overlooked.
It was on.
Yeah, so is there an error on a copy of the minutes in the packet that you're addressing? Or are you asking
On the website, it was.
HHS?
The website, I believe it said we were going to discuss it at this meeting of the 6th, and we didn't. So are we going to discuss HHS committee today?
The HHS minutes from
Okay.
the 5th are on the agenda under F. So if you wanted, they could be discussed there.
Okay.
And so the committee met the day before the board meeting, and so we will often add a placekeeper on the agenda that the committee met in case there's an action item that the committee wants to bring forward.
Okay. Thank you.
So we have a motion by Josh. Do we have a second to approve the board minutes in the summary? Thank you, Steve. Motion by Josh, second by Steve. Once again, any questions on that? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Now we've got the minutes on the Health and Human Service Advisory Committee, the Pine City 2023 Tax Increment Districts, and the Sandstone 2023 Tax Increment Districts. Are there any questions on those? The motion to,
I had a question on the minutes for HHS. I guess it ties to the budget. I could discuss that the budget too, but just on the second page of it on the bottom, just it says there's no levy increase requested, which is a good thing. But then it discusses the potential need to add an additional supervisor to help balance workload. So would that be, we can discuss that at the budget?
Yeah.
let's talk about that at the budget, yeah.
Right, we can discuss it.
Just to clarify though, Jay, it does, there is a portion that would ask for
that we talked about, another supervisor, but it will not increase in levy dollars requested.
Thank you, Steve.
We have a motion for the minutes of the boards, committees, and correspondence.
I'll move.
Thanks, Josh.
I'll second.
Thanks, Matt. Motion by Josh, second by Matt. Any questions?
One quick question.
Yes.
The TIF reporting stuff, is that says annual? And we usually get all that?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Moore, typically you get just a summary of that, but in case you wanted an in-depth report, have
I
it.
was like, 294 pages.
We got it.
Oh, we got it. There's a lot of good reading there.
All those in favor of approving the minutes of the boards, committees, and correspondence, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carried. And then we need to approve the consent agenda.
I'll move consent.
Thanks, Matt.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Steve. Motion by Matt, second by Steve. Any questions on the consent agenda? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carried. Here on the regular agenda, so this is where we are going to start with the security grant for Amy? Or are we gonna? Do that?
We should do, just process through, yep, if we get to the security, we'll follow 5.
Okay. All right. So we're gonna discuss the facility committee. Matt, did you want to take that?
Yeah, I'll take that. We met on August 7th. And the snow removal was, contract was set up, and I think M&M, gotta find my notes. Of that, most of the discussion, we had a presentation on the roof of the courthouse. And the presenter presented the new kind of model instead of just we have the thinnest membrane. And we're approaching life expectancy. There's water ponding already. So if I was going to summarize the whole thing, if we go with, a little bit more discussion, the upgraded version is multi-layer and it overlaps on the seams. And then it's just a thin layer of rock, not the big rock. It's just kind of like a shingle almost. That's 1.5 million. And then if we replace, as is, it's about, his estimate is about $1 million. So it's roughly 500 grand more. And the one that sits now is a 20-year roof. If we do it the same way, it's 20 years. And if we go with the other one, it can be a 50-year roof, but somewhere along the 20-25 year, you have to come in and do a maintenance thing. That costs, it's 250 grand or something like that. But so no matter what happens, when we have to do the roof at some point, the coolers that sit there, they're all on one thing. It's got a framework and everything, so they got to bring a crane in and it has to be lifted. All those coolers, it's a big thing, for the whole courthouse. So it has to be lifted. And then if you lift them, they're close to end of life. So they suggest we replace the coolers too, which adds another million. So
Sure, I'm glad.
We're gonna have.
I that much to upgrade my house.
Take a chance and put them back down. So then the other thing that happens is, the reason they say it's smart to replace them, because you have to move a big crane in to do the lifting, and it'll be there for that project. And if they go out 2 years later, you got to bring the crane back in, and that's roughly what, 80 to 100 grand or something to bring the crane in. So it's like, there you sit. And Mark, if you want to add something, go right ahead.
Well, Madam Chair, I just wanted to add, so we got the 20-year single membrane roof, and I think we agreed that we probably want to do something beyond that. I don't know if we need a 50-year roof because, realistically, is it a 50-year roof? Probably not. Because things change and the building's gonna change and we're all gonna be dead. But we're looking at getting some prices. Maybe not all of us.
Josh said,
It will be.
Josh said he's not gonna be, no.
So we're looking at like a 30-year multi-membrane roof. We're gonna get some prices on that and it was a great presentation and we learned some things and we learned there's maybe some other issues with the brick and things that we should probably address when we do this. So it's a big project. I don't think we're saying, you know, we're gonna put 2.5 million in the budget this year. We're not gonna ask for that, but I think Matt's just saying, hey, this is a big project. And so we need to start planning how we're gonna pay for this. And it ain't gonna just be the levy increase, probably. So,
Big price tag.
yeah, so.
So then the only thing I didn't cover was like if we patch it, what does that buy us? You know,
Well,
not worth.
presentation is someone that wants us to have them, you know, wants us to hire them. You can patch roofs, you know, you can extend the lives. I mean, no, so it's not a dire need right now. But, you know, it is a life expectancy at 20 years. So you're gonna start to have things that you need to repair here and there, which isn't super expensive. But eventually we got equipment to replace. So we're kind of trying to tie it into when we replace that AC equipment, ventilation equipment, that's when we would do the roof. So that's coming up.
Any idea when that's gonna happen or when the need is gonna be there to replace those?
They're probably 20 years too, you know? And so the building opened in 07. So in the next couple of years, I think so maybe we got 3 years really where we should get it done. And so how do we want to budget that? Are we going to borrow money or how do you want to plan for it? Maybe that's a good discussion item on budget when you get to that. So.
Thank you.
Yep.
Mark, can I ask you one more question? It'd be nice if we got the bonds paid off. And then, which is gonna happen in 33? Kelly, 32.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know about
That's 8 years from now.
yeah, I mean,
I don't know if we can expect to get that much life out of stuff because, you know, we got.
yeah, and something can fail at any time.
Yeah, I understand that.
So if the equipment doesn't fail and we can do it all at once and we can remove that equipment and replace it new, we'll do that. But yeah, something. I mean, that is a possibility, I think. I don't know. I don't think we have any water infiltration through the brick and the flashing yet. The guy that looked at the roof said that there wasn't any weeping out of the brick. Pete thinks that there is, it's just under the flashing. So it's going out under the roof. So that's why we probably haven't seen anything, but we still want to do some of that repair work when we do the roofs.
Sure. I'd just like to say thank you, Facilities Committee, because this is one of them deals where all of a sudden, let's just say you guys weren't looking at this 5 years from now, you have a huge problem like, hey, guys, we need $2.5 million that needs to be done this year. So I talked to other municipalities and other organizations that don't have a very good working facility committee type of stuff that looks long-term, and then all of a sudden we need 30 million, 50 million to do this or that because something's crumbling or something's really in dire need. So I just want to say thank you and my time on the facility.
Yeah, they had pictures of it and like the heat, it's shrinking.
Yeah.
You know, and it's pulling away, the rubber's, you know, so it has issues.
Yeah.
But like, I don't think it's any water infiltration yet, so, but
We know it's coming.
yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the main thing, is just get it on the.
A lot of moss growing and.
And, you know, facilities committee came out of building this building. We met every month and now we probably meet every other month, I think. And so fortunately, JJ couldn't make this one. It was a great presentation, but I'm just a little cautious about that really how far we need to go with it, but.
I always wonder, you know, how much is technology gonna change in 20 years and it might be cheap. You know what I mean? Things are changing all the time.
3 years is a reasonable thing to plan for, but you know, you get beyond that. I mean. Oh,
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Mark.
That's all I had. Sure.
And now we're gonna go to the courthouse security grant.
No, we're gonna go to technology.
Oh, man. Okay, got it. Okay, technology committee report.
Take that.
Yeah. I was on the courthouse security, so. Technology committee, we did meet, we talked about the CrowdStrike outage, which Ryan had kind of went over at the board meeting last time too. And just kind of went over it a little bit more on how much of a big deal it was, and how well these guys just busted their butts and got it taken care of, and hopefully got some much needed rest after the fact. But the county was up and operational. We talked about other counties that didn't get operational till the next week. And I just wanted to say one thing about that is, what do you do with your employees? So we have, 300 employees roughly at the county, and none of them can use their computer. Yes, some of the people could still work, but what do you do with them? I mean, it's not their fault that they can't work. And
Right.
so could you imagine if you had 150 employees that you paid them for the day and they couldn't do nothing? So that's just one of the things. Also, Sheriff Nelson talked about squad camera refresh and body camera refresh. We're at I can't remember, 5-year maintenance agreement. So we talked about that's coming up. We gotta talk about that in budget, and that stuff gets expensive, and like around 450,000. But that's over 5 years. So it's just one of them things that we talk about technology, and even in a roof, it changes every year. So Chief Deputy Grice did give us a presentation on a license plate reader, which I was extremely, after he was talking about this, I was like, this thing sounds pretty cool, but it sounds like $500,000. And it ended up that they're thinking they can get into it for around 20,000. So they're gonna look at that. But what that is it's they can, if they put these license plate readers in some certain spots, if there is an Amber Alert, if there is a high profile or someone that's on the run from different agencies, it can hit this thing's constantly reading them. It's not gonna read if you got an outstanding ticket on the vehicle, or it's just if they put that kind of stuff in, and or they can search a license plate and it can say where it's been and see if they can hit it. And across the nation, it's been used in a lot of different spots, and it's been very effective with finding some stuff. So it's not, it's a little bit scary in some aspects that people think that, hey, if I didn't pay my parking ticket or something like that, but it's not for that. This is more for a higher profile, or if you had someone go missing and this is their license plate number, you could get a hit at this time in this place, whatever. So it was a pretty good presentation. We're going to talk about it in budget coming up, and from there. And then I talked about some fishing, not the good kind with the hook and sinker type of one. So email phishing, we're looking at upping that a little bit. Some other counties have had some pretty good hacking, and it costs a lot of money, and it's a lot of issues. And if someone gets some very sensitive information, it creates a whole lot of problems for a lot of people. So we're talking about that, but of course, all that stuff is extremely expensive. So Ryan's gonna share that with us through the budget talks and stuff. So other than that,
The license plate reader thing was kind of, I'm with Josh. It seems like every time something comes forward and has to do with technology, it's going to be at least $250,000, not $500,000. This is actually a pretty cheap thing that I can see some value to it. With these Amber Alerts where a child goes missing, or a elderly person gets in their vehicle and drives someplace, and when they've got Alzheimer's or dementia and they can't find them, it helps with those in these high profile drug cases where they know there's a vehicle fits with this license plate that's known in the upper Midwest, and it enters off the freeway in Pine City. That software would alert the deputies that vehicle is in town. Correct, Jeff? And so I think we can't have enough deputies in our county to sit at every intersection looking for things like that. But so if we can adopt some technology that will help us, maybe that's the best use of our tax dollars. Yeah.
Was that the software too that would get them, like if the schools, is that how they could access into there? Or was that a different one? I can't remember.
It's the same company that offers that. There would be some additional costs to make that.
And so one of the things is once you get into this, they have, like Jeff said, some additional software, and it wasn't expensive. That like schools and businesses, so I could give the sheriff's department access to my security cameras, or the schools could give them access to their. So if there is an incident, they could get into their camera system, and or if there's alarm like at one of my stores, they could check it and say, hey, there is somebody walking around inside there. We can prepare accordingly, type of deal. So that's another thing. Of course, I would have to, or the schools would have to sign an agreement that they can access it and whatever. But that's some other cool stuff that we can kind of get into it, see how it is. And it's not 450,000. And if it doesn't work out, you're stuck. It's yes, 20,000 is a lot. But it might be something that we can get into, and it just benefits everything going forward.
Madam Chair. Question. So I have a question too. So what is the life expectancy of the body camera?
5 years.
5 years? The whole camera? So that's all
Well,
the cameras too?
So what we did in the first contract and the other one was similar. There was a 3-year review on all the body worn one. The ones that are in the squads, they replaced and cleaned it. But there's everything, all technology will get to you in 3 years. So the new contract, it's written in as a one time. And we could decide when that would be based on where our cameras are now. If it's the first year, or if it's the third or fourth year, we would get a refresh on the body worn side of it. But they're also replacing everything as it breaks. So with that built-in warranty, the turnaround's been pretty quick.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a question
Go ahead, JJ.
for the technology committee. So it was 21,000 a year with 19,000 per year after. That must be per car then, right? Per vehicle? No?
That was everything he had talked about.
Oh,
Yeah, that's the license plate,
The license plate reader,
not the camera.
not the body cam. That's the,
oh,
Those would be hard mounted, not you.
Yeah.
they would pick like 5 locations in the county to
like
pick those up.
traffic sign on the
Yeah,
fixed like
yep.
over the, oh, gotcha. Okay, thank you.
And that was another thing that Chief Deputy did talk about was trying to get some, if cities wanted to kind of buy in, they could attach onto that. And I don't remember what it was per camera, but it wasn't bad.
5-6 grand.
Yeah, and they could, if they said, hey, I want one of these at the middle, on one of their city streets or something like that, they could add some to the system and everything, so.
Would this be a duplication of services? Doesn't the state already have this type of thing? They don't.
All right, we'll move on to the Personnel Committee report.
I'll take that. Met August 12th. And the assessor's office, we acknowledge the resignation of Assistant Technician Brenda Bellin effective August 16th, 2024. And recommended approving the backfill of the position and any subsequent vacancies that may occur due to internal promotion or lateral transfer. And Sheriff's Office Jail, we acknowledge the resignation of Corrections Officer Luke Wilson effective August 9th, 2024. And approve the backfill of that position and any subsequent vacancies that may occur due to internal promotion or lateral transfer. And then we approve the regrade of the jail programs coordinator position from a grade 9 to a grade 10. And along with that, the accompanying updated job description to reflect the increase in the job complexity and the responsibilities. And Madam Chair, I'll move those recommendations.
I'll second.
Okay, we got a motion by Matt, a second by Josh. Are there any questions on this?
I have a question.
Go ahead, JJ.
Like on a new job description where they're taking on, maybe Jeff could answer, I guess, Rod isn't here, but when you're taking on more responsibilities, is it new responsibilities or is he just shifting like a workload deal?
Oh, Jackie's online. Do you want to answer that, Jackie?
Sure. Yes, it was more than a shifting of workload, specifically greater responsibility with court transports, managing jail, assisting with the management of jail transports, court hearings, professional visits, inmate tracking management system, working with intake officers, attending court hearings. So there was really a laundry list of responsibilities that have grown this role.
Thank you. Are there any other questions?
Yeah, so I just gotta help me understand this. So jail transport, who did the jail transport before? Or jail transport's been around?
He just organizes the transports. So it's just keeping it moving, keeping it all moving.
Oh,
More responsibility to manage and coordinate.
You good, JJ?
you got it.
I want to say that I got a phone call a week ago from our sheriff's department because my husband's phone was 4 years old and started butt dialing people randomly and called the sheriff's office 4 times. And it was like a number that's not in his contact list. It wasn't 911. It was a really funky number. And our dispatchers found my personal cell phone number and called me. And I was able to run out in the field to find out what Jerry was doing. He hadn't touched his phone or he now has a new phone. But, you know, it amazes me what our employees do. And for them to be able to track me down and then have me track him down and make sure that he was good was a huge blessing for me. And if he would have been in trouble, it would have been a bigger blessing. And so just on what they do, you know, we don't see what they do because they're behind closed doors, but we have some amazing employees. So I wish I could remember the gentleman's name that called me, but I was kind of frazzled. So just a shout out to them. So on that, we have a motion by Matt. Oh, go ahead, Josh.
Yes, just a little bit more discussion on this. Anytime we do change a grade, it isn't just we sit around at the thing and say, oh yeah, he's done this, he's done this. We'll just change the grade. This goes through a lot of extensive background where the HR, the department, they regrade it. They redo all the responsibilities from the last job description to the new job description, and everything they put on there. And it does go through a point system. And we've got a lot of them we regrade that go through this system that don't get regraded and or maybe even downgraded. I do remember some that are downgraded. So it isn't just, you know, Joe's doing a great job and we're just gonna give them a raise. This is vetted. And a lot of times they do even go through a third party, non-internal, that does do it. So there's a lot of thought, a lot of work that goes into these things. So
I'll add to that, Madam Chair. It isn't willy-nilly that we just rubber stamp this. We always we ask these questions and we get these explanations before we bring it here, or we wouldn't recommend it.
Well, and I'll use.
Not just the good old voices.
I can use myself as an example. I did way above and beyond what I needed to do. And after a while, it was looked at to be reclassified and it was reclassified up. And when I retired to take this job, they re-lowered it because the next person wasn't doing all those other things that I did. So it does. I mean, it's very well looked at.
Yeah, and there are check and balances because it's a union, there's union position in there.
Right.
So if it wasn't fair, someone would file a grievance.
Yeah.
So we always check all that when we're on committee to make sure it's a nice, fair process and just. So otherwise they won't hold a lot. Anyway, it's a good question, JJ, but we don't always explain things.
Okay, so we have a motion by Matt, a second by Josh. Once again, any other questions on this? All right, can we have all those in favor say aye for the personnel report?
Hi.
Aye.
All those against say no. Motion carried. Thank you. Right, award contract 2402. And do we want to do both of these at the same time?
There's just one.
Okay.
I do love it.
Slide into open bids for the two bridge replacement around Creek. This is 100% federal funding, so first projects I've worked with
30 years, that's been 100% federal funding, so somebody must have dropped the ball somewhere, we picked the ball up and said, we think we can do it. We're getting across the finish line, the feds held up for a month. They don't usually hold it that long, so I would recommend awarding it to Redstone Construction for $1,530,194.75.
That's below the engineer's estimate.
That's 1.1% over, a little bit over about
Is this the one where you're,
18 grand over.
Yeah.
What's that?
this is the one where you're straightening the road?
Yeah, we're gonna straighten that out a little bit. They want to get started on Monday. They've been kind of chomping at the bit to get going. It's about a 10 or 12 week project. So we're gonna be into November. We like to be done by the end of October, but it's gonna get pushed into November, so.
I'll move that.
Thank you, Steve.
I'll second.
Thanks, Matt. Thank you for catching that ball getting dropped. That was,
Well, like I said, Steve was at the meeting, so I couldn't say no. That's why it's important for you all to be at various committee meetings.
I think it's a great example in the last year and a half.
right.
Mark has brought home about $3.5 million worth of projects that have been mentioned at this Northeast Minnesota Transportation meeting. And
I think it's about 5
million. 5 million.
I say keep those numbers higher.
No, it is. I forgot about this.
It's a painful 5 million, but we'll take it.
Good job, Mark. Thank you.
They trust Mark and they look down the line of people sitting there and say, Mark, can you handle this project? And Mark is, because he's done pre-planning, that's why we do these 5-year road projects and even look beyond that so that when something like this comes up, it's in our bailiwick. It's something we've looked at. The pre-engineering is already done, so we can say confidently, yes, we can get it done. We've hit the nail on the head. It's a lot of paperwork. I know that, Mark, and appreciate what you do.
Thanks.
Thank you. We have a motion by Steve and a second by Matt. Are there any questions on this?
I just had a question, Mark, you don't have to, you don't have to get up. We went and looked at that on the road tour, correct, this one? I think there was.
I remember, to be honest, maybe one of the years we probably did.
I think we drove.
Yeah, it's a timber bridge. I know there was someone that went off, if you're not familiar with it, there's a slight angle there and someone has gone off before and fortunately ended up in the water.
And the other, recall any of the other contractors that did, the names of the other ones?
On this?
Yeah.
We had Northland.
Northland.
So we had 2, yes. So nowadays, if we get 2 bids that are good, we feel pretty good about it. We've had 1 bid at times, but we used to get 4 or 5. But it's just, there's not as many contractors, so.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Right, JJ, this is the road that we went on this year.
Yeah, yep,
Section, yeah.
yep, I remember what that was.
Right, all those in favor to award contract number 2402? Yeah, opposed, say no. Motion carried. We're on Kettle River St. Croix Partnership Agreement. Matt, do you want to do that? Or is that?
I can take it. Okay, yeah, that's fine. Go ahead, Kelly.
All right, because I'm not seeing Mike jump in, so I will take that. So we have moved forward with our Kettle River Upper St. Croix One Watershed One plan. And as part of that process, we have the adjoining counties and soil and water districts that are part of that plan. And So to move the projects forward, each entity will enter into this master project agreement. And as Pine County, the financial host, it ends up to be a master agreement with us because it's tied to dollars. So we received our first master project agreement from Carlton County. So you have that before you today to approve. And then once we have those master project agreements with each entity, so at the next board meeting, you'll see a couple more coming. Those entities can also submit a statement of work for a specific project within that plan. So before you today, you also have a statement of work from Carlton County for them to purchase the online software system from Schneider Geospatial in the amount of $47,800. That is one watershed, one plan funds. You're actually going to see one coming from us identical to that. And so as the financial host to that, you all currently have to approve each of those agreements, even though it goes through all the different processes within the one watershed, one plan. Since we are the financial host to it, you guys currently have to approve the projects. Which leads me to item C, which would be asking you to delegate the authority to me to approve those projects. Because otherwise you're going to have your agenda filled up with them shortly. And they get all reviewed by the planning committee, by the committees of the one watershed, one plan. And if the projects are over $50,000, there's also consultants that are involved. And so just to make it a smoother process, we would ask that you delegate myself as the approver for those future statements of work.
Perfect.
Are there any questions for Kelly?
And I will move it.
All right, Matt.
I'll second it.
Thanks, Steve. Once again, are there any questions for Kelly on this? All right, we've got a motion by Matt, a second by Steve. All those in favor for the Kettle River Partnership A, B, and C, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. All right, Amy, I tried getting you up earlier, but Dave kept holding me back.
Thank you for getting me on short notice today. And Matt met with us as well as were Sheriff Nelson and Kelly. So did you guys get the handouts for the Safe and Secure Courthouse Grant? So what this is this came out of the 2024 legislature. It was started before, but the new Chief Justice Hudson initiated it and the bill passed. That there's up to $500,000 appropriated for the Safe and Secure Courthouse Committee. So before COVID hit and when Judge Flanagan was here, we had a security committee. So we have started that up again with Judge Jason Steffen heading it. And it's, Matt Ludwig on it, Reese Fredrickson, Sheriff Nelson. So what we talked about is all of our judges would support a single point of entry weapons screening. We recognize right now that it's a tough budget. So we talked about the grant and then we talked about putting together different proposals to put forth through to you guys. So Sheriff Nelson and Rod Williamson came up with 4 different proposals and we agreed upon one that we would like to bring forward, which was attached on the back. So that proposal, what we'd like to propose is an unarmed security officer. So similar to what we used to have, which was $91,500. 6 part-time bailiffs. We currently have 3 to up that number. Some additional equipment that we would need is an additional metal detector. We currently have 1, but if that one's down, then we don't have another one. Handheld wands, increased surveillance cameras, 800 MKH radios, and panic alarms. So we also discussed that we haven't done security threat training with staff for some time. I wasn't at the last one. So we wanted to move forward with that and active shooter training. We do have the budget for that. The equipment training, and then also all staff training. Some other things that we wanted to ask in addition was additional inspection tables, inspection bins, workstations for the bailiffs, crowd control stanchions, bulletproof panels and glass, signage, miscellaneous electrical door switches. So obviously the big ask would be the budget for the security guards. That was going to be, if we wanted for the personnel, would be the $271,500. The additional security equipment would be $17,000 and the training would be $9,000. So what we had proposed would be to ask the grant for $148,750 with, if we did that, then the board would agree to the $148,750 match. We realize that is a lot. If we aren't able to do that, any amount, we could kind of tailor that down. What we discussed is if we can't do security officers at this point in time, we could possibly put in for the additional security equipment and the training for the security officers. So maybe going down to the 17,000 and 9,000 for 26,000. Sheriff Nelson, did you have anything in addition to that? It's a lot, and thank you for getting this on because the committee just got rolling again. We do have to get the proposal in by August 26th, end of day. So quick turnaround. So if we do get approved for a certain amount, I will be asking Sheriff Nelson and Attorney Frederickson for letters of recommendation as well for our grant.
Amy, where are you looking at putting the one entry? Is this just for the courts or is this for the whole courthouse?
We would eventually like to get it at the front of the building, but Sheriff Nelson, can you talk more about that too?
Yeah, it hasn't been clearly defined what it is.
The mic in case there's anybody watching online. I don't know if there is, but just in case, sorry.
Sheriff Nelson here for the record then, Madam Chair and Board. So yeah, it would be front glass doors. And in talking through it, it appears to be pretty simple to route everyone through, one of those sets as a set of entry doors, and channel them through there. So that would be the plan roughly right now on where that would set up.
So would there still be the two entries on the other sides of the building for employees, or would you have everybody go through that?
That would be something that would have to be set by policy, and we haven't talked that far through.
Okay. I think it's great that you guys are looking at security because I think that's been a concern for many years.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions? I'm sorry. Go ahead, Steve.
I do have a question for Amy.
Yes. I asked that Kelly brought to my attention to is the grant is through 2026. So we have, what we come up with is a proposal, how we're gonna roll this out and then have it done by 2026. So I don't think the budget match has to be immediately today. That's through the 2-year period. So thank you for clarifying, Kelly.
That had to do with part of my question because it's hard to support that if we had to commit to $148,000 potential match today.
Yes.
Not knowing, hearing the other budget requests. But I'm assuming if you got the grant and you didn't get the full amount of the grant, but you got a partial amount, then the match would be apportioned back.
Correct. And they did ask about that in the application. We just said, that we'd like to move forward possibly with some of the security equipment, depending upon what they did, or maybe an additional security guard as well. So just because we asked.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, sorry.
Some tweaks built in there.
Yes, yes. No, Sheriff Nelson and Rod did a really nice job of putting the proposals together too.
Would there be money that could come out of the remainder of the ARPA or the other money that was given to the county already out of the surplus? So wouldn't, I was concerned of what gets passed on down to the taxpayer, county taxpayer.
I think that's a fair question that will come up during the budget presentations.
Sure.
Because there will be some
Balances.
funds available.
Gotcha.
And how they're allocated will be, up to the county board.
Follow-up question. Is everybody going back to court or are they still doing stuff Zoom?
We're doing stuff via Zoom. So that was the thought too, was we would just man eventually too, like if we have single point entry, obviously we'd want it manned 24 or every day the courthouse is open. Sheriff Nelson can get into more of the threats if it's not. But the thought is to have it when court is in person. They did pass something recently that's saying that we would have to go back into court in person more. We're hopeful to deviate a little bit from that. That's another request I have to put in as well too. But it is moving towards more in-person court. And we have seen the traffic pick up in court administration as well as I'm sure all the other offices have too.
Up to pre-COVID numbers yet?
Well, it's,
Customers or not?
it depends upon the caseload. We're still getting the same, we're still getting higher criminals. Sheriff Nelson and the county attorney are doing a good job of keeping that up, which I'll talk about at the next meeting. But yeah, our divorces are still up there, our HROs, our OFPs, so some of that volatile stuff.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Going to be around for a little bit,
Yes,
but can I talk to you after the meeting about the different?
I was gonna head back to the courthouse, but
Oh, okay.
I got another meeting I gotta go to, so that's okay.
I get it. Thank
Yeah.
you. Are there any other questions?
I'm assuming that the placement of where we have this would be ongoing discussion, and what we decide today is that it's gonna be at the front door.
Madam Chair,
Has to be at the front door.
I'm reading Sheriff Nelson's body language. He's nodding his head yes to your question. That this is just the initial step.
Yeah.
If funding is approved through the grant, there would be a significant amount of work that would have to be done to develop the actual policies, the placement of the equipment, the staffing, et cetera.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
So with that, we need to pass resolution 2024-49 in support of the courthouse security grant application. Do we have a motion for that?
I will move it forward.
Thank you, Matt.
I'll second.
Thank you, Josh. And Matt, are there any questions? Just one more time. We have a motion by Matt, a second by Josh. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. And then we will move on to the budget discussion.
It's gonna be about an hour, we can take it or no.
Yep, we need to. Well, we have a minute. Can I talk to you real quick?
If I'm gonna hold your hat.
So you. Just stand right in the middle.
Yes, because you were getting old, but that's okay.
Give you guys copies of the agenda, and at the end, there's a spot for the cannabis discussion. And so we take it. We'll put the dinner together.
Fire drill in here, Lauren.
I thought ours held.
Okay, and my question is. Right here, this room, yes. Yeah, that's the zoning board meeting. Yeah. This Thursday, we have a couple public hearings.
That's here?
Yes, this room.
That's the one. That's the one. The old, yeah, what I usually bought.
Right, yeah. Yeah. Gonna be interesting discussion. We started discussing it at the last meeting in June, but I think they were very overwhelmed with.
They're changing.
They still, they haven't made the rules of exactly. That is still. The problem is what? So how can, it doesn't end yet. But it's still. How can we make the rules? Well, but yes, I'm also on the others. Door in the, this is very social. And so. It's not, it's great. It's scenario. Yes. Yeah. So. Our level is fine. Safety stuff, I don't go right. I mean, we share what we know. Yeah. And she's having fun. But it's. Sorry, it's no way. This social equity micro. Yes. In our township. You're gonna have to see. They got it.
Well, I'm the guys I want to.
Yeah.
I'm just.
Somebody's got some.
Are they? No, they're gone. They left. That's how it's not. I was gonna say.
moratorium, which is what I'm talking about, that we just had all the. Thanks you for coming. And that's a lot, yeah, you know, that's the only thing that we think about. That's a why. So that's. This way that.
So then see. And get what you wear, but.
Yeah.
Then you can.
Not gonna be what you wish for. You got a rough budget year, I think.
And then also, who want to come visit us, so we have an afterward. Will that just be completely sounds?
I haven't, but I just seen Joel.
So, there's a lot of things, so I'm.
I can see.
On top of what, or some of the touch lines.
We kind of got him together, chatted. He goes, you know, I've seen him a couple
Exactly,
of
go out
times.
and if you have an area that is gonna start to have or increase in crime, or, you know, things. Go up, even if you were like.
And he goes, so that wasn't the place.
They look up my statistics, I'm on insurance. Wow. And so there you go again, we're gonna keep talking. That's the. Yeah.
Or maybe.
There is some mitigation that will help because if you don't put them in, they are going to. Because the customer.
Yeah, pretty organized.
Yeah.
I can see my-
I wasn't trying to be. I was just. But because. Annual one, like, I was hopefully gonna get here early and north of the day. I was like, could I get space at any time?
Yeah, yeah.
He's gonna come to.
Oh,
nice.
Going in March, to meet something on my.
All right, I think we'll call the meeting back to order. JJ? We're gonna call the meeting to order.
Is that a way of getting hearing for him in another thing, you know,
I don't think we have anything
here
set up for that.
Not,
Do we?
not today, but it's because
Dave just got up, he's checking, so we'll.
yeah, because he tries to read everybody's lips, but that doesn't work.
I know we don't look at you.
Yeah, and it's hard for me to hear.
Yeah.
It's not very loud in here.
Yeah.
That's
We have an assistive hearing device in the courthouse, in the boardroom, but not in this room.
You know,
okay. Well, I will.
they always have that semen. Well, they do 3 or 4, so we have the layers, so then the next, where that one seam is, the next one overlaps a little bit farther, so you end up, the seams end up like.
Oh.
And then. Use a different. Ends up.
Okay.
We did a Chuck's.
We're just waiting, we're waiting for Dave to finish up. Okay,
Yes.
if you want to go ahead with the budget.
No. That's too bad.
That's not sharp.
Okay, so Kelly Schroeder, County Auditor Treasurer. So I'm here today as the beginning of the 2025 budget process. And then at the And two, I'll go through my department's budgets and the budgets that I'm responsible for. So, but first, it's just an overview after all the departments have sent their budget requests in, where we're starting at for square one. So just an overview of the budget process in general of where we're going, where we are and where we're going to go. So today we'll have our initial budget review. And then we'll review the auditor treasurer budgets along with some of the outside entities will be here this afternoon with their budget requests. On August 27th, next Tuesday, we have additional department meetings with the different departments on what their budget requests are. September 3rd, we've got our regular board meeting, and then there'll be the final budget, department budget presentations. And then September 17th, we have our regular board meeting where we could have additional discussion or adopt a preliminary budget levy. And then the deadline to adopt the preliminary is September 30th. So if there's additional special meetings that need to happen between that regular meeting and September 30th, that could happen as well. October and November, we spend time just reviewing the budget and making any final tweaks that we can as we get further information regarding revenues and expenses. And we can hold additional meetings too at that time, should we need them. And then in December, on December 5th, we have our truth and taxation meeting. And then on December 17th would be the final county board meeting of the year, where that final budget and levy for 2025 would need to be approved. So that's where we are and where we're going over the next 4 months.
Then your seatbelts.
Yeah, here we go. I always like to just review this because it's budget, and the words budget and levy sometimes are used interchangeably, but they're really not interchangeable. Budget means the total revenue and expenses of the county, where levy is just how much of those expenses are paid for by property tax dollars. So you can see the different funds that we have listed on the left-hand side. And then the next column is how much the expenses are in those funds in the 2024 budget. And then the far right column is how much of those expenses are actually paid by levy dollars. So you can see some of those, like Road and Bridge, for example, they're spending $16 million in 2024, but yet only 2.2 million of that is paid with property tax dollars because they have other revenue sources for those other expenses. And you can kind of see that as we go down the different funds. Our budget format is in the form of funds. So we kind of talked about that on the previous slide. So we have several different funds that we budget in, and you can see them listed there. But then within those funds, there's departments. So for example, the commissioners have a budget and the administrator has a budget, and those are the departments. And then within those departments, there's literally line items for every type of expense. And so as we talk about the budget, it's really important that today we're going to talk about really on the fund level, the big overview level. And then as we start to talk about, for example, my individual department budgets, we'll start to talk about those specific line items like telephone, publications, and subscriptions, where it can get down to those minor details of why we need certain dollars in certain lines. And so as you're listening to departments, I really encourage you to ask about those specific line items and not just look at the bottom line. So budgets, of course, they are really just an estimate, and we make those estimates based on historical and projected amounts. So for example, some of our aids, the state releases the amount that our aids are going to be next year. So we're able to grab those. And then expenses, a lot of times we're able to just look at historically, what have they cost us? And union contracts, what are they set as, and those types of things. With our revenues, again, like county program aid, the state has already released what that amount will be next year. And it is our assumption that they're really going to follow through on that. There has been times in the past they have not. But our assumption at this point is that they've given us the number and they'll follow through with that. We do get a significant amount of reimbursements, for example, in our Health and Human Services Fund. And so the assumption is there that those will still be coming in. And then the other big assumption that we'll talk about some today is with the expense side, obviously for wages, we have our contracts, and for telephone, for example, or some of those little line items, we can look at what they historically cost us. But health insurance has always been a little bit of a question mark. And now that we're self-insured, we have a much better lens on it. But when we started building the 2025 budget, we had to stick a number in there. And a 10% increase seemed kind of normal. And so that's what we built in there. But as we will talk, that we might not need that, which is the great news. So the budget, there is a little wiggle room with that in mind. And the insurance committee meets again next week, so we will work on honing those numbers. So major revenue changes as we look at the budget as a whole. Public safety aid was something that we had in our 2024 budget that is going away because that was a one-time funding. So as we were starting to talk about the 2025 budget, right off the bat, we were $820,000 short without even doing anything because that was a one-time funding piece. And then the other piece that kind of hits hard a little bit is the MCIT dividend that has trended down and down and down over the years. Previously, we always budgeted about $150,000 for that, and now it just continues to trend down. So we're having our budget follow that. But that is a revenue that kind of hits hard as it goes away because it's very helpful when it comes. Overall, within the entire budget, when we look at our state aids and grants, overall, they're going up $525,000. So that's great news. Police contract is increasing, and I'm sure that Jeff will talk about that some when he's talking about his budget. But of course, we've got our schools that are coming back online and just planned contract increases and things. So our police contract revenue is up pretty nicely. And then interest is also increasing. So obviously, interest rates have been wonderful over the last several years, and we've really capitalized on that. However, and so last year we budgeted 400,000 in 2024, we were anticipating bringing in 400,000 of revenue. We've already met that this year. Next year, I thought, well, how much can I really plan on? And it's a little bit of a balancing point because I can only lock in interest rates on so much money because we need liquid cash. And so right now that liquid cash is making a really nice return at about 5%. But in the future, if rates start to decrease, then on our liquid cash, we're not going to be making nearly the revenue we are right now on interest. So while our interest earnings this year look amazing and like I should be increasing them significantly, I really was cautious to only increase them by that $50,000, knowing if interest rates start to decrease, then that revenue won't be there. We want to make sure that we are budgeting revenues that we think we can meet. Major expense changes, wages and benefits, just right off the bat, our $2.2 million increase. So my little thumbs down is that's not helpful. But yet we knew it was coming. In that wages and benefits is that health insurance 10% increase, which I have the number a little bit later in the slide, but that's about $250,000 of that 10% increase that potentially can be dampened a little bit. Highway construction, so that's kind of, it's down $4.6 million, but again, we'd like to get really excited about that, but it is all project related. So it's not, yes, the expenses are going down, but it's not like we're saving that much money. Other positives are, or expenses that are going to be helpful that are changing. Our out-of-home placements are going down just over $132,000. And then major equipment purchases are going down $125,000. And that really comes down to, we moved those ARPA funds over to get some of those things caught up. And we've really done some significant work on making sure our fleet's ready to go. So we are able to kind of bring that back down to a more manageable number after putting those ARPA funds in, and things like that. So overall revenue, when we look at the county compared 2024 to 2025, I just have the three major funds listed because those are where most of the dollars are. So you can see really all of the funds except for Health and Human Services are going down next year for revenues, are anticipated to go down. General fund isn't a significant decrease. Road and bridge looks like a significant decrease, but again, that's project related, so we don't get too excited about that. Overall, when you're looking, revenues are looking like they're going down about $4.3 million. One item to note, and we'll talk about this, is the Road and Bridge Fund. Currently, the budget is built with a $65,000 transfer from the Land Parks and Recreation Fund for that trail construction. And so that's already included in that revenue. And so that's something we haven't done before, and we'll kind of talk about a little bit. So I just have a list of the top 10 non-tax levy revenues in the general fund, just so that you can kind of know for the general fund where our funds mainly come from. And it's interesting because this list changes from year to year. If you pulled up my screen or my slides like this from previous years, it's interesting because they move around. So for example, PILT used to be about midway down the list. And assessor contracts used to be about midway up the list. And those are all things that have either been made by a decision or just the state funds have changed. I do want to address the PILT is the PILT payment from the state isn't going down. Because you see for 2024 to 2025, it's going down about $46,000. But that's a budget number. In 2024, when we were making, in 2023, when we were making the 2024 budget, the legislative session had just gotten done. We had gotten information that PILT would be increasing, and I try to do the calculations on how much the county's PILT's going to be, and I come up with this $947,000. Well, once the legislation actually works its way through and the calculations are done, it's more like $901,000. So it's not that our PILT's going down. It's just that my calculations last year overstated a bit because I was using just kind of legislative information that we had at the time.
Okay.
Yeah.
So rental revenue, is that like HHS?
Right.
Spaces?
Yep. So the rental revenue is what we charge Health and Human Services for their spaces.
Thanks.
Thanks, Becky. Overview of expenses. So you can see, of course, we've got the general fund and HHS fund that's going up for expenses. And the general fund, really that's expected because that is mainly salaries. And as we talked, salaries and benefits are going up. Health and Human Services does have a slight increase, and Becky can kind of dig in that some more. And Road and Bridge, you see them significantly going down, which again, we'd like to get excited about that, but that is all project related. So between 24 and 25, we do have our overall expenses going down, just over $2 million. But again, so much of that is related to that Road and Bridge projects. When we look at it, the big overview. Just looking at the top 10 non-debt expenses that the county faces, and this is looking county-wide, so not at a specific fund, but of course, salaries and benefits are our big one. That is where the majority of our money goes if we're gonna say different pots of money. And you can see that's projected to go up $2.2 million. There is some additional staff in that and the 10% health insurance increase that we'll be talking about. And then Road and Bridge construction, of course, went down significantly, but that's all projects. And you can kind of work your way down the list at the different amounts, those top expenses and how they either went up or went down from 24 to 25.
Oh, can you go back?
Yeah.
Becky, I have a question for you, I think. Out-of-home placements, do we know why they're looking like they're going down? Is there something that's, I want to say it's family resource centers, but I want to.
I'm Becky Foss, HHS Director for Pine County. I think the answer is a lot of things. So yes, we have definitely made intentional efforts to provide front-end services to families in prevention, such as the Family Resource Center, such as our family home visiting and public health. Those things have helped keep people out of our deep end services and child protection and placement. So that certainly helps. I also want to give a lot of credit to staff who are working hard and working safety plans with families and doing everything within their power to keep families together. And sometimes it's luck. Maybe next year we'll have a family of 10 move into our county and all 8, 9 kids have significant behavioral health needs. So barring those situations, I just think staff are doing a great job. And I think we are intentionally making efforts to keep families out of our system.
Awesome. Josh.
Madam Chair, it's not luck. It's all the work you guys are doing.
Yeah.
So it is. So thank you.
Thank you, Becky.
But what qualifies as major equipment purchases?
So that's Mark's fleet budget,
That's the dump trucks and
right? And even just the vehicles our assessors drive around and our zoning people and
Squad cars.
squad cars. How could I forget though? Are you ready to move on, Steve? Or-
Yep.
Okay, sounds good. So debt, we talked about debt just a little bit ago about, but we wait till those bonds are paid off. So the two big bonds are paid off in 2031. And so this is just a review of our 3 bonds that we have out there. And I note what their very beginning balance was, what their balance is at the end of this year, how much our 2025 payment is. That payment includes principal and interest. So then that very next column, I break it down just so that you can see principal only. How much are we paying that balance down next year? And then, of course, what year they're paid off. So we can't wait till 2031. And I think all of us will still be alive, Mark.
You laugh.
So as we look at the entire budget and we put it all together, we note that, again, I have the graph that breaks it down between general fund, health and human services, and road and bridge. And in a balanced budget, obviously you'd want revenue to equal expenditures. And you can see places where that's not the case, very clearly on the graph. However, as we look at the hard numbers, revenue at 51 million, expenses at 53.5 million, that leaves us with a gap of almost $2.3 million. So that is the number that we focus on, that we really have to dwindle down and figure out how we're going to dwindle that down. And so I think there's some hard conversations to be had with that. Steve, are you going to do a what % levy is that as you pick up your phone?
yeah.
10. It's about a 10% levy increase. If we were going to say we're done today, we'll just do that. It's a 10% levy increase. So I like to break it down though by departments and really look at where is that gap. And so this is my column or my sheet that looks at per department. Where are the funds needed? And so they go largest to smallest. And I want to point out that, for example, the sheriff's office sitting there at the top saying he's going to need $1.2 million. That's not Jeff asking for $1.2 million new money, because last year he had over $800,000 of public safety aid to help him pay for that. So it's really a double whammy this year. He's got his regular increase that he's asking for, but then we also have to make up that gap of that revenue that he doesn't have this year. The right side just shows you the salary and benefit increases. So I always find that helpful because, for example, as you go down the jail, for example, they need another $328,000 next year, yet their salaries are going up $338,000. So what that tells you is either there's additional revenue that Rod found or savings that Rod found. And it kind of works its way down. Assessor, for example, there's a significant amount of new levy dollars needed there. And then you look at their salaries and it's $20,000 difference. However, as we'll talk about when we start to talk about the assessor budget, is we have intentionally started to lower those contracts with those cities and townships by $1 a parcel per year. And so that's why you see that gap, is because they have less and less revenue each year to help pay for those expenses. The departments with the stars on them do have additional staff that was requested. And as the budgets come through, we'll talk about those. The assessor one I don't have to discuss though, because that was approved already at the July 16th county board meeting, and that position's in the process of being interviewed and things. But I do want to note that that $180,000 increase in salary and staff for the assessor isn't all existing staff that was in the 2024 budget, because we did add that additional staff already this year. And we'll dig into my 0.5 FTE grant manager position in a bit. Are you ready, Steve? It's a lot.
My question,
You look like you're computing.
in veteran services, it's not a lot, but the increase is higher than the salary increase is higher than the increase asked for. How does
Right.
that work?
Right, so either that tells me that there's other expenses. Well, and in veteran services specifically, there's just other expenses we were able to cut by a little bit. Because there was no new revenue we brought in.
So do you have the lieutenant figured in this number?
Correct.
We don't have a lieutenant now.
Right, so that would be a new position that's baked into these numbers right now.
Are there any other asks included besides that one?
The other one that's noted on there is a 0.5, a half-time grant manager position in my department. And we'll talk about that.
Asks, so they're all of them.
Right, but the middle one, the assessor one's a little bit not of an ask because that's already been approved, but I just want to be clear as we're looking at those salaries and benefits. It wasn't in the 24 budget, but it's there.
Thank you.
Could you talk a little bit on the court security, how the grant would impact what's presented here?
Yes. So court security, you see that the request currently is that the budget would go up 15,196, and that's the exact amount the staffing increase would be. And that does not take into account any of the changes that are proposed with the grant. But the big thing that I think about, and the big thing that Amy and I talked about, is the fact that that is a 2-year grant. And you can use in-kind things or things that you already have as your match. And so I'm not super concerned about this $147,000 potential match that we have to come up with. Yes, if we add a full-time court security officer, we would definitely have to be looking at some budget dollars here that we're not currently planning for. But they're not huge dollars either. Does that answer your question? And it's interesting, like recorder and solid waste down there. Those two look really good. And the wonderful or kind of interesting part of that is those two are both directly related to health insurance coverage that the employees took. That differs from where we budgeted them last year. So that.
Is there a small department?
Right.
If somebody went off a family to
Single. Yeah.
no insurance.
Right. So those bottom two look really great, and really it comes down to those selections of the health insurance from the employees. We get open enrollment data very late in the year, and so we're not always able to adjust the budget to account for those. So if we were going to balance the 2025 budget, I do note, Steve, your 1% increase would be about $221,000. So again, if we were going to balance the budget today with nothing but property taxes, it'd be about a 10% increase. I do kind of want to break it down by fund. So in the general fund, currently the deficit is almost $2.2 million. That deficit already includes, so if you go at the very bottom of the screen, I was able to reduce the election levy by $20,000. And so I was able to disperse that election levy throughout the general fund and the debt fund. So with the numbers you're seeing right now have a 0% levy increase in them because the general fund already has an extra $12,648 levy, but yet that wasn't new levy dollars you guys had to come up with. It was just reallocated from the elections department. Health and Human Services can be budgeted with 0 levy dollars, road and bridge, 0 levy dollars, but it does include that $65,000 transfer from the land Parks and Rec fund, that dedicated fund for the trail work. And really that's when we started that fund. That was the purpose of, as we were building trails, we didn't want to take dollars away from roads. Debt funds, as we worked through those, we needed an additional $7,352 of levy dollars. But again, I was just able to absorb those election savings into that. And then the building fund and tech fund currently are asking for zero additional dollars. The building fund, the levy is $25,000. And as I listen to a $1.5 million roof replacement, I think, oh man, that's a lot of years of $25,000 levies that we need to do. So that's one that maybe we need to think about. Currently, it's proposed to stay at the same $25,000, but if we're truly going to plan for some of those things, that's a place we need to look. The tech,
We've never really seen the plan like that, like we do tech fund, because the outlay is more often.
right. Yeah, so we don't have a plan, but part of the strategic plan was to come up with a capital improvement program, to help start to lay that out.
Yeah, you start out that way and then, you know.
Gone.
That's
the first one.
That's the first thing.
Right. Yeah. And then the elections fund, as I talk about that fund specifically, will explain that how that can go down. But we got a new funding from the state for elections. So as we start to talk about levy increases, I always like to show this slide that looks at about a 13-year history of where our levies were and where they've gone. And I just want to remind us that as we look at 0% levies or even negative levies like we did in the early 2011 and 2012 years, that puts the county in a really bad spot for fund balance. We get to a point where we have trouble paying our bills. So the idea to just use fund balance is nice and great. However, it's not a financially sound decision, in my opinion. Because yes, you're going to get to a point where the fund balance is enough that you don't need to worry about it, or you think you might have a little extra in fund balance, but we're not at that point. So our 2023 fund balance is at about 23% of our operating expenses. The state auditor's office would like to see us between 35 and 50% of our operating expenses. Back in 2012, obviously, that 35% wasn't even an attainable number that we ever thought we could make. And so the board at that time set what they thought was an attainable goal of a 20 to 35% fund balance of the operating expenses in the general fund. And so right now we've battled through and we're at 23%. Which, I mean, we're sitting so much better than we have in the past. But
We're not going back to 12.
right, and you could get there very quickly at the point you choose not to make cuts to the budget or find other revenue sources. So other items I want to note that's part of this budget is that it provides increased or stable funding to our partner organizations. So this afternoon, you'll hear from the Historical Society and they're asking for a $10,000 increase. I don't want to steal their thunder, but that's included in the budget. Soil and Water is asking for a $5,000 increase, so that's included. And the Ag Society and the Initiative Foundation are included at the same amounts as previous years. I've already kind of beat this to death, but it does include a 10% health insurance increase, which is about $258,000. And so there could be some wiggle room there as we work through our.
Do you have a sense for how that breaks down to the general fund? How much of that 258?
No, I would if I had my spreadsheet. I didn't delete yesterday because I thought I was done with it.
It's maybe, yeah, it's not.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting because just before the meeting, Mark and I were chatting and Mark said, well, if the 10% health insurance isn't there, it'll save me like $100,000. And I said, no, Mark, it's not that much. But I could get those numbers by funds.
I mean, I guess my point would be, as you think about this, a significant, if we're able to be successful at coming in with zero or super low health insurance increase, that $250,000 is not really available to just lop off the general fund. And that would track back to Becky and to Mark, and they have come in at zero levy right now. So they're balancing very precarious.
Other things to note that are just changes is our legislature had increased our contribution for para for corrections officers. So July 1st of 2025, it's going from 8.75% for our contribution to 10.25%. So that
And fine.
10.25%.
Wow.
Yeah, and so I mean it's not big dollars, but it's just something that it's additional county dollars that have to go in. So it's about $21,000 increase, and that's only for the half a year. Where in 2026, it will be the whole year. So it'll be a jump for us. So again, I already mentioned this, that it maintains the building fund and technology funds at their current levels of, is that really what we want to do? I don't know. We can have those discussions. And then again, uses that land parks and rec fund for trail construction, the amount of $65,000 to the highway fund. So, ideas of how we close this gap, because we do have a gap. So obviously you can do, and I hope that you do over the next couple of weeks, detailed department level reviews of the requests that are coming in. And that's line by line of, what is in this line, why do you need that much, those types of things. There are additional staff in the general fund, to the tune of $172,000 and $172,000. So that could be a place to consider. I do note the two positions down at the bottom. We could consider a use of restricted funds, which I have a slide coming up on that. We can obviously always consider cuts to existing programs. We may want to look at ARPA as a solution, or of course, our last thing would be a levy increase, which it probably needs to be a combination of potentially all of those to close this large gap that we have.
So can I ask questions about the grant manager? Are you going to be talking about that later?
I'll be talking about that in the auditor treasurer portion. Okay.
Go ahead, Matt.
I just want to ask Dave a question. Do we have one contract left next year?
For collective bargaining agreements, yes. So we have, everything is settled for 2025 except for correction officers. And that we have to negotiate that this year. It expires at the end of this year, 2020.
So that's a pretty big group. So, and then the contracts we have settled are settled out 3 or 2.
Right, through 2026. Through 2026.
All the way through 2026, 2 years, right?
Yeah.
So.
No, not yet.
So we have one more thing coming at us then for 2026 too.
So a lot of the last bargaining unit stuff was a lot of market adjustment to get back on track, because of the big jump. So hopefully even next round, it shouldn't be that.
Well, we know what the numbers are gonna be, probably. Because we have all the ones set.
But they were, well, that's that talk.
Yeah.
My other question was, do you know where we started last year in the budget? And it was around this number.
1.8 million.
Oh, it was a little less.
This is the biggest number I've had to work with.
Okay.
The biggest gap.
And that's all I didn't want a specific dollar amount.
So I just am checking my notes. I think we are only settled to the end of 2025 with most units. We're to the end of 2026 with the legal assistants. I think the legal assistants are the only one we're settled to 2026.
We have 2024, 20.
Yep, everyone else is 2025, except for correction officers who are 2024.
Okay, thank you.
But end of 25.
End of
So we
2025.
won't, only thing next, or nothing then next year.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, then, towards the end, okay, yeah.
So correction officers, isn't that where we started the market analysis? So we wouldn't
This is-
necessarily need to do market analysis, hopefully.
Well, maybe to Matt's point, the county's position for 2025 is pretty well established.
Yeah.
And the county's position for 2026, based on our settled contract, is pretty well established.
Yeah.
So restricted funds, so throughout our finances, we do have restricted funds. So that means sometimes we have revenues that come in that we don't spend in a given year. And they can't just go into the unassigned general fund. They have to be held in their own little spot, their own fund balance. And so sometimes it's great to look at those things to help fill those gaps. So I listed some of the ones that have bigger amounts here, yeah, just for your information to start thinking about as we're talking about places that we're short. Are there expenses that we can shift to these? The land fund, of course, includes 4 different types of funds. So we've got the blight cleanup, the roads, parks and rec, and timber development. Those individual amounts are listed at the bottom. I do want to note recorder compliance, which is not sitting at a large balance. It's actually sitting currently at a negative balance. And we're going to talk about those funds a little bit more, but really we've shifted so many expenses to those funds, and obviously we have our expenses we're going to pay out of them, but that's about it at this point. And so really that recorder compliance fund just took that big hit last year from going from our new tax and CAMA system. But within each of these restricted funds, they're restricted because either statute says that they can only be used for these certain expenses, or the grant requirements say they can only be used for these certain expenses. So it's not like we can look at Veterans Outreach and say, well, we're going to pay half of Mindy's salary out of that, because that's not what it was for.
They're not all restricted that same way though, correct?
All of these are restricted in one way or another, whether it is by statutory requirement, grant agreement, or county board action.
County, correct, okay. So either the legislature has to allow us to do it, or it's just an action of the board.
Right,
Or it's a condition of the grant.
right, or a condition of the grant.
Like an AIS grant.
Right, the aquatic invasive species.
Yeah. Decide, well, we're gonna pay your grant assistant out of that fund.
No, but we could start to look, right, we could start to look at some of those as being able to capture dollars for having someone managing it.
Right. And I assume we do that often to relook at recapturing dollars, because I think that's the success Becky has had in HHS is, you know, she convinced us sometimes we need some more help so we can capture these dollars, especially on these MA reimbursements, and we've done. The people are still getting the service, but we're getting the money that's entitled to us without breaking the law in any way, shape, or form.
Right. And within the general fund, it's difficult because right now we have every single department managing their own grants and doing really their own thing. And so until they come to me and say, hey, what do you think about this or that? For example, the Evening Reporting Center grant. Terry and Sherry come to me and say, what do you think about this? Can you help us put the budget together? And I say, sure. And guess what? It says right there, we can take 10% off the top for the auditor treasurer's office. So we're going to do that. And had they not come to me, then we wouldn't, it was only $7,500, but still, it was dollars that we were able to capture because I was involved with that. But yet there's so many of them out there that I'm not. The Victim Services Grant, for example, I'm very involved with that, and there's just no dollars to capture because the grant amount doesn't cover the position.
Kettle River 1W1P, you get something out of that.
Right, so we're gonna end up with funds out of the Kettle River Watershed 1 plan, which you'll see that showing up in my, in the planning and zoning budget.
Sure. And I would just like to add, you know, like the K-9 fund, that we were funding that out of levy dollars for a little while, maybe.
Well, there's still levy dollars this year and for 2025 plan.
To see that balance like that is nice because it is taking it off the local, you know, off the local levy. Some, otherwise it would have to be more, you know.
Right.
So.
Yeah, and I think that was, I mean, that was mainly one single big donation.
So you're saying you have a bunch, like, they came to you and asked and you were able to take 10% off, but you can't see all of them or there's too many. They might be documented. Could you provide that list to the board? So maybe we can help you and.
Sure.
I'd like to see that. Thank you. So one of those solutions to this gap that I mentioned would be ARPA. And
ARPA is a little bit more pressing too than it has been in the past because all funds have to be committed to a specific contract or project by contract by December 31st of 2024. So I have on the right the list of plans that you guys already had put in place and approved of things that are just not completed necessarily or are out of balance a little bit. And so there's a ton of other already completed projects that are just done that I don't have on this screen that have already been paid for, are put away to pasture. But these are the ones that are still kind of sitting out there with dollars that maybe we need to consider reallocating or deciding what we should do with them. Because again, this list is great, but next year the state auditors will ask, I want to see your contract for that, because otherwise it's not really committed. The one piece is the staffing, because we hired the economic development director specifically with ARPA funds. Yes, we don't have a contract with Leslie, but yet she falls under our employment practices and policies. So that one works without a contract, but the rest of them, you literally have to have documented contracts for the amounts, how we're going to spend them. And some of them, like as you get to the bottom, election equipment tabulators, that's done. There's $67 sitting there that you could reallocate somewhere else. Employee referral bonus, I think we just didn't get the brakes put on that fast enough, in that overspent slightly. And HHS directed aid, I think, is done. So there's $296 you can reallocate there too.
So on the jail enhancements, the deadline or the timeline would require that the county board commit to a project to spend those monies in the jail by the end of the year or reallocate those monies. So that's gonna be a hard, I mean, it's already September for planning purposes. So that's gonna be a real tight timeline.
Right.
So let me understand this, Kelly. Take broadband. We got $636,000 left in that fund.
So we know the Starwire money, and I can't remember that amount, is not gonna be spent by Starwire.
Right.
We know we have ECE made a request for a big amount, like half of their total remaining, and I can't remember what that is.
Yeah.
And they're working to come back with a plan to get the other half.
Just don't have a contract.
Well,
Is that what
right.
you're saying?
Yeah, and it hasn't been spent. So some of the unspent money has been
Committed.
is whatever the technical term
Yep.
is.
But we just need to make sure we take those places to actually truly show them on paper as committed.
Yeah.
And board action is not good enough.
So I think I understand that, but then could we have one more column?
Yeah.
That says
Really uncommitted.
636,000 left in broadband. We've got 87,000 that we could spend on IT equipment if we wanted to.
We need to come back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think that would be, we might be able to whittle that 2.2 million down to 2 million in a half an hour.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
So Kelly, if we don't spend it, do they claw it back?
Yeah.
And when's the claw back? I mean, is it end at that date? That'll, whatever's sitting there at that date is the claw back.
So like, I'll have to do my report in April of 2025. So I would assume at that point, should I not have the documented committed expenses, then that would be the point that the dollars would be going back.
I really think we need to think hard on that jail project, because I don't see, even if we said, hire an architect October 1st, how we come up with the money to do that and get it spent in a way that doesn't unnecessarily jeopardize the money.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be spent by December 31st. It just has to be committed by a contract. It has to be spent by December 31st of 2026.
Just because we allocate it isn't a commitment.
Right.
You have a contract.
Right.
Signature.
But Leslie's position is good.
Leslie's position is good, which that went back and forth over the last year because Treasury put out first a direction that said that doesn't work because you could cut them at any time. but now they changed their mind on that.
So we know that Leslie's good. What other ones do we know that we don't even have to think about? Any?
Well, the HHS directed aid is a bookkeeping thing, just to zero that out.
Right,
Your referral bonus, we need to just zero that.
right. Those bottom three just need to get zeroed out. And then like the U of M Community Health, for example, we have a contract for that, but I don't know if they'll end up actually spending all that.
It will if we let them, is my sense. If we told them, here's the parameters, they would spend that.
But we do have a contract.
Yeah.
So we're good as far as the federal government's concerned.
Software upgrades, that was really just a placeholder for, we know we have unmet needs in technology. We know we have some, the last time we did some reallocation, we freed up some dollars and this was the placekeeper to put them. So those are available to put towards the 2025 budget. And there are technology expenses in the 2025 budget that you can spend them on. The childcare, foster care, that's mostly committed through the ongoing project. We got that grant that Leslie could speak in more detail on, but I don't think there's a lot of extra there based on, we received the grant from the state and it's just.
This is the matching funds for that grant.
I don't know, Sheriff, the medical dispatch, that line item, if you have any, if you are able to share any.
Oh, and that math doesn't work out. My unspent amount didn't get updated.
The youth engagement,
I think it should be 16, not 46.
Right.
that's, we've had conversations, there was the turnover. If we do nothing, my guess is that's gonna lapse.
Right,
Because they-
and so I would rather say we've got some real life things that we know we can contract with for 2025 instead of having this thing that's been hanging out for 4 years that we haven't been able to put a contract together. Let's take that money and put it over here and spend it on something that we know.
We'll have to look at we do have an agreement with the Mille Lacs Community. We'll have to look at that prior to our meeting with Sheena in
Right.
September.
Right.
Yeah.
And we got 3 months to get something going for a contract.
Do you think there's room to grab 50 grand here and 50 grand there and any of these to help our budget?
That's what I think.
Yeah,
That's what I think we'd be smart because even with broadband, it wouldn't change that much if we, but are we kicking the can down the road on the?
Well, I think we know we got money that's not gonna be spent.
Right.
yeah. And so there's another column that is absolute known. Here's the available funds. And then there's another column of potential based on commissioner direction. Because we would have to go revisit the agreements that we have or the conversations we've had with others.
Right.
And so we need to work on that and get those developed so that by the time the department presentations are done, we can come back and say, here's an updated list.
Right.
So the sheriff's stuff, could we use that to go towards the cameras that we just voted on today through the facility committee?
I'm worried about the jail.
I know.
That we're not gonna have a contract committed there.
Do we use that for roof repair? I mean, at a jail.
But I'm sitting here thinking, we need a new roof.
That's what I just said. Can we use it towards the roof? Because that does affect the jail.
Yeah, and so here's.
But that's not gonna help our budget.
But it would, yeah.
In the long run, it would, but
Long run it would, but I think there's probably room to say we can move some of this money that we know for sure. The Styrewire thing is not gonna get spent.
Right.
Let's move it into something that we know is a need for 25.
Well, it's good to know that we have money that we can look at.
It's not gonna fill 2.2 million.
It's gonna be interesting.
If you want food for thought, right? Thinking long-term, it's gonna be challenging to do a roof, to do an HVAC replacement, to do jail enhancements without issuing debt. right?
Could
I
we
mean,
do,
those-
could we do like the roof maintenance just to, instead of doing a whole new roof, if we did the roof maintenance to help this roof to last a little bit longer, hoping that our bills will be paid off or our debt will be paid off.
And I think the first step we gotta find out is how much of that money do we
Exactly.
really have. It's not 2,089,000,
Right.
it's 400,000 or something. And then look at, after we've listened to all the departments' budget requests, say, we could take 75,000 from this thing and buy that.
That's right.
Stuff that you want.
Right.
I'm thinking IT, because that's an easy one, and say, here, now that budget's whole. Or more close to it.
Would this be an easy thing to do for next Tuesday's meeting? There was
Well,
like intake of breath over here.
So I would say there may be value to doing it for the meeting after next Tuesday's meeting.
Okay.
Because next Tuesday, like this afternoon, it's gonna be a lot of input.
Okay.
And once you get the full picture, in my mind, it makes sense. Then you come back and you reevaluate the big picture and try to find how do you close the gap.
Yeah.
The other solution that I wanted to address was the tax levy as a solution. And I think that we're all on the same page that a 10% tax levy isn't an option. But I did want to just present you some information, some interesting information that was compiled by the Hubbard County Administrator. And he had compiled this for, I think, all of or most of the counties in the state, but I pulled out kind of our comparable in our neighbor counties. And so it was interesting to me. If we look at our levy percent of total revenues, for example, so how much of our money coming in actually comes from property tax dollars? So in Pine County, that's 39.8% of our money coming in comes from property taxes. So meaning our other expenses or our other revenues come from somewhere else. So it's very interesting as we look at our neighboring counties and our comparable counties where they land. On average, it's 43.3% of the levy, of the revenues are levy dollars in those counties. So we are nicely under that, actually. And same if you keep moving over levy per capita. So if we just take our population divided by our levy, again, average is $826.87 per capita. So the levy per capita, I'm sitting at $734.90. It's great to know that we are pretty far below average, really. And then county tax rate, which is, it's a hard comparable in my mind because when you look at the county tax rate in Pine County at 43.7, which is actually much lower than the average, it's very difficult to compare that to, a $200,000 house in Pine County is very different than a $200,000 house in Isani County. And so it's very difficult to compare that county tax rate because your values of your properties are so very different. And so, but I found solace in the fact as we look at the list, we are below average when we're looking at our comparables or our neighbors.
Could I ask you a question?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, could you compare us then to, let's say Dakota County, Rock County, Washington County? And
Why do you want to do Washington when they're a metro?
Cass? Well, just to put things in perspective, I mean, so it's to me like the highest tax county in the state is Kanavik. They're on the list. Carlson is the second highest. They're on the list.
Yeah, those are just more
Chisago,
counties population.
So they're highest based on tax capacity.
Tax rate, yes.
Tax capacity rate.
But I mean, I can.
It's really hard, we used to, when we do our AMC meeting and Aiken County was where we are now, and we were at 68 or 70%. It was, we didn't have what they have. We didn't have all the non-homestead
$1 million houses.
that they had.
that they had. Now we probably are getting more comparable because of what's happened with people in lake property, but
How much does that come down? Because we were like at 50
we
something.
were at,
We're well over 60.
I remember being at 67, 68%.
Yeah, that's why I really like the two middle columns so much better because they're hard numbers really comparing
Yeah.
apples to apples. You know, how much, you know, are we really getting dollars from other places than taxes? And the answer is yes, actually at a better rate than our neighbors in our comparable counties. And is our levy comparable based on the amount of people that actually live here? And yes, absolutely.
Head Josh.
So this is an awesome table. I would say that because we've always, and the tax rate is a big deal. But you look at it, where does it affect people? It affects them the dollar. A rate percentage means nothing. Dollars is what it means. So Aiken County is one of the lowest ones, but they still pay a couple $100 more in taxes than Pine County. Cass County is by far the lowest. They still pay more per person. You can look at percentages all you want. Percentages, I had a really good business guy tell me, percentages don't pay the bills. Dollars pay the bills. So what does it actually cost the taxpayers? We can say we have, we could be at a 60% and still be less than Cass County, so.
Right, and it really comes down to like that levy per capita taxpayers that live here. Because you notice Aiken County, their taxpayers that live there pay a lot. Where when you get over to their county tax rate, it's very low because you have all of these non-homestead seasonal type places that are valued significantly high. But that levy per capita for people who live here, we're sitting very nicely.
And I would guess you could give JJ the data for the whole state.
Yep.
I have a hard time with that because it's using your time, which is kind of already.
Jeff Cadwell from Hubbard County put the whole thing together. I can hit forward.
That works then.
Just caveat that it's the data that he gathered is self-reported. It's not quality checked, right? Because I know when he sent it out, I found at least one error that I let him know of. That I just take it for what it's worth.
Yep.
There's the only single measure that matters at the end of the day is the vote you take at your December meeting. You said so everything else is just talk.
I think too, if you're gonna send that out to everybody, just keep in mind that we're not comparable to Washington County. There's no way. We're not, even Dakota County, those counties have so much more than we have. A lot of those, so keep that in mind when you look at that it's not apples to apples.
And then I also provided you that big sheet, that big colorful sheet. I don't have a slide on this, but again, as you're thinking about property levy increases, the question really comes down to how does that impact actual properties in Pine County? Because as we know, values of properties change at different rates. Whether you're residential, whether you're agricultural, whether you're in the south part of the county or the north part of the county, it all depends on what the real estate market's doing. And so with that, even if you did a 0% levy increase, as you look down that very first blue column, you're going to see some of your taxes would still go up, even if you did a 0% levy increase. And so it's just something to keep in mind that as you're talking about this, a 0% doesn't mean that every single one of your constituents' taxes won't go up, because a lot of them will still go up even if you do a 0%. Because you had those value changes and it just shifts from one place to the next.
So I know you're not the auditor anymore, but
Assessor.
as
The auditor, I think.
I mean, the treasurer or assessor, sorry. The home value
Right.
apparently are still on
Still going up.
a lot
Right.
in our township at least.
Yeah. And I know we always talk about that new construction number of, well, if you have new things that are built, really that's like new tax capacity you can capture. And so sometimes it's kind of nice to think about that. You think, oh, there's all this new building, so that's gotta be a big number, and really it comes down to about 1%. So of our total value, about 1% is new construction. So, I mean, in theory, you could do a 1% levy increase, and the only thing you're doing is capturing that new construction, but that of course doesn't work in the grand scheme of things. So these are just food for thought as we look at figuring out how do we close that gap. All right, I made it through the entire overview. We're ready, we'll jump into the department budgets,
Can I make a just
yeah,
comment that we're scheduled to reconvene at 1 o'clock with the various organizations. You still have committee reports and some regular business. And if you don't take a break at all before you start 1 o'clock, the afternoon will get really long.
Yeah.
So if you wanted to maybe go back and finish your regular agenda and then take a little break for 1 o'clock and then have Kelly finish either this afternoon or next week.
I'll vote for
probably do
that.
So do you know about how much longer you have?
it'd probably be at least a half an hour.
Steve made a motion that we, no.
All right, I'll go.
So Kelly, thanks for everything that you've done though. This in the middle of elections, I'm thinking would be just a tad overwhelming. Seriously, thank you. Okay, where's my agenda? Hang on. So we are gonna go to commissioner updates. We've got the Kettle River. Is there anything to add other than what we already talked about with the Kettle River today? Matt?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out, we covered most of it. One thing I wanted to bring up and. Oh, I was just gonna say that Carlton County is a huge project, just sitting, waiting for the Maya land.
Oh, awesome.
Anyway, hopefully, but that's it.
Perfect.
We covered most of it in on the agenda.
East Central. Sorry.
Here's one main thing that we did determine is, we pay a host site fee to Arthur Township, which is the township we're in, and to Canadian County. And so what has happened with that is, especially the county fee, we forget about giving them an increase every once in a while. So it gets to be 5 or 6 or 7 years. And so we are going to catch up with them a little bit, and then we're going to do with Canadian County, the same thing we do for the haulers is you take the consumer price index, and that's what we increase the tipping fees. And we're gonna do that with the host fee. Gonna increase it 2% or whatever the CPI is. And so we don't get behind by 6, 7. It makes sense. One commissioner wondered why we should ever raise it at all. My answer to that was, if it was in your county, you'd want to.
Right.
And we're trying to be fair. The new cell construction is Bradaloni construction, and you people have run into those guys before. Very familiar with landfill construction. They've got the contract, they're moving right along on it. And we're within weeks of having complete fill on the zone we're in now. So hopefully it all times out perfectly, and then the new hole will be ready for us to dump into when that whole line is done.
Thank you. The regional library, we talked budget, and Carla is coming this afternoon, so she will go over the budget with us. I don't think we need to go there. Soil and Water Conservation District.
Yeah, that was 14th. We talked briefly about the Sturgeon Lake water outlet situation. They had a tech visit out there. I shared that information with Windermere. There's a new DNR area hydrologist, Kelly Condiff. Everything else was business as usual. I haven't received a copy of the minutes yet. If anybody needs them, I'm sure Paul has a draft available.
County Canvassing Board.
We canvassed.
You canvassed?
That was pretty easy. It's the easiest canvassing board I've ever been on.
couple of hiccups, easy to straighten out, slam dunk, we're out in like 40 minutes.
Yeah, it was not many issues.
Good. Any
Not many
others?
voters.
Yeah, I know. What was it? 24%? Is that what you had sent out on the weekly update?
But, and there wasn't,
23?
there
That was
weren't many
close.
things to vote on.
Right.
You know,
Well, and primary is always pretty low.
yeah.
But I think Pine County has really good records on, we have more people that vote for those than a lot of other people do. So, any others? I have others, but I'm looking to see. Just, I just actually came from the workforce. We had the, conference up in Duluth, and there was a lot of really good information that was given there. Chat GPT is huge. It was a lot of the text about the AI. Yeah, the one thing that they said is, well, I for the people on personnel, millennials have a 12-second attention span. So there was a lot of talk about your Gen Z and your millennials, what they do. Gen Z has an 8-second attention span. So they're talking when you're doing your interviews with people, how much you can actually ask because their attention span is so little. 65% of Gen Z aim to own their own business down the road. Average career right now, average time in a career is 2 years and 9 months. For somebody that did 35 years, that's kind of a hard thing to understand. Average increase in salary when you move to a different position is 14.9%. If you stay in your current position, it's like 3%. And then 73% of the people want to do the hybrid and have flexibility. So it was really interesting to try to think of where we're going to be in 5 years down the road, and getting employment. So I think Mark said it best. If you can't make it to your meeting, make sure that you have your alternate attend, because looking at the money, having a seat at the table with him on those is important. So if you can't make it to your meeting, make sure that you get your alternate to attend. You got your upcoming meetings. We'll take a break. We're going to reconvene at